The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before Ambassador Daniel Harris like a cathedral built by gods. Its curved walls rising 300 meters to a ceiling that displayed the swirling colors of a distant nebula. And he stood at the central podium feeling the weight of 8 billion human souls resting on his shoulders, as he prepared to speak words that would determine humanity's place among the stars. 12 species sat in tiered galleries around him, their representatives watching with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile. And Daniel had spent 20 years building relationships with each of them, learning their customs, their fears, their hopes for the future that all sentient beings shared regardless of the world that birthed them. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Daniel began, his voice steady and warm. Humanity comes before you today not as conquerors or supplicants, but as partners who have proven our worth through 5 decades of faithful service to galactic peace. He gestured to the holographic display behind him, which showed images of human medical ships treating plague victims on Vardish colonies, human engineers helping rebuild cities destroyed by asteroid impacts, human soldiers standing alongside allied forces against pirates who threatened trade routes. We have honored every treaty, Daniel continued. We have shared our resources freely, and we have asked for nothing in return except the chance to stand as equals among you. The Theshan delegate, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, nodded in approval. And beside her, the representative from the Kovani Republic leaned forward with interest. But Daniel noticed that Ambassador Varth of the Kelzari Dominion wore an expression of barely concealed contempt. Varth was ancient even by Kelzari standards, his scaled face marked with ceremonial scars that spoke of 100 political battles won through manipulation and cruelty. And Daniel had always sensed something dangerous lurking behind those cold reptilian eyes. High Chancellor Drin, the elected leader of the council, raised one of her 6 appendages for silence, before speaking in the musical tones of her species. The council recognizes Ambassador Varth of the Kelzari Dominion, who has requested time to address this petition. Varth rose slowly, deliberately, savoring the attention as he descended to the speaking floor where Daniel stood. And when he spoke, his voice carried the hiss of ancient prejudice. Fellow council members, I must object to this farce in the strongest possible terms, Varth declared. These humans come from a death world, a planet so hostile that they evolved by killing everything around them. And now they wish to sit among civilized species as if they belong here. Daniel kept his expression neutral, though his heart beat faster with controlled anger. Ambassador Varth, if I may respond, you may not, Varth snapped, turning to address the council directly. I have obtained evidence that these so-called peaceful humans have been secretly constructing weapons prohibited by Section 7 of the Galactic Armament Treaty. Up to you. Hologram appeared showing what looked like orbital platforms bristling with weapons. And Daniel recognized immediately that the images were fabricated. The designs combining elements that no human engineer would ever put together. These images are false, Daniel said firmly. Any technical analysis will prove they are digitally constructed. The word of a human means nothing, Varth sneered. Your species lies as easily as breathing, and the council would be foolish to trust anything you say. The chamber erupted in murmurs, some delegates expressing shock at Varth's accusations, while others nodded in agreement. And High Chancellor Drin called for order with increasing frustration. We shall vote on the matter of human membership, Drin announced. All in favor of granting full status? Daniel counted the raised appendages, tentacles, and hand. 6 species voted yes, and his heart lifted briefly before Drin continued. All opposed? 7 species voted no, including the Kelzari and their allied factions. And Daniel felt the weight of defeat settle onto his shoulders, even as he maintained his dignified composure. The petition is denied, Drin declared. Humanity shall remain in provisional status pending future review. Daniel bowed respectfully, preparing to withdraw with grace. But Vareth was not finished. High Chancellor, one invoke the right of purification under Article 93 of the Ancient Protocols, Vareth announced. And a chill ran through the chamber as older delegates recognized what he was doing. On what grounds? Drin asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. This human has insulted Kelzari honor by implying that I presented false evidence, Vareth said, his eyes fixed on Daniel with predatory intensity. The ancient protocols grant me the right to cleanse this insult through sacred fire. Daniel understood now what was happening. Understood that Vareth had planned this from the beginning. But he refused to show fear even as guards moved to block the exits. Ambassador Harris has diplomatic immunity under council law, one of the Veshan. Delegates protested. The ancient protocols supersede modern conventions, Vareth replied smoothly. High Chancellor, do you deny my right? Drin hesitated, and in that hesitation Daniel saw the cowardice that had allowed the council to ignore injustice for millennia. The willingness to sacrifice one life to avoid confrontation with a powerful faction. The right is recognized, Drin said quietly. And Daniel noticed that she could not meet his eyes. Vareth produced a small device from his robes, its surface glowing with containment fields that held plasma at temperatures that could melt steel. And he smiled as he activated it. Any final words, human? Daniel Harris stood straight, thinking of his family on Earth. His sister who had begged him not to take this posting. His friends who had celebrated when he received the ambassadorship. And he thought of the billions of humans who had placed their trust in him to represent them with honor. Tell them I did not beg, Daniel said clearly. His voice broadcast across every communication channel in the chamber and transmitted instantly to Earth through the quantum relay network. The plasma engulfed him in a column of white gold fire. And Ambassador Daniel Harris died standing upright with his eyes open. Refusing to give Vareth the satisfaction of seeing him fall, the chamber fell silent as the flames dissipated, leaving nothing but ash where a good man had stood moments before High Chancellor Drin cleared her throat awkwardly before speaking. This matter is concluded under traditional law, and no further action is required. This session is adjourned. The delegates filed out in silence, some looking troubled, while others seemed merely inconvenienced. And within an hour, the great chamber was empty, except for the cleaning drones that swept away the ashes of humanity's ambassador, as if he had never existed at all but across the void of space. The quantum transmission carrying Daniel's final words and final moments was already reaching Earth. And though the Galactic Council did not know it yet, they had just made the worst mistake in their 10,000-year history. Vareth returned to his quarters satisfied with his work, certain that the primitive humans would react with impotent rage that would justify further action against them, never suspecting that he had fundamentally misunderstood what humanity was capable of when, united by grief and purpose, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the affairs of mortal beings. But something had shifted in the galaxy that night. Something that would change everything for every species that called the cosmos home in Geneva on Earth. Admiral Kevin Moore sat in his office reviewing routine reports when his bar's communication terminal lit up with an emergency transmission. And as he watched the recording of Daniel Harris burning alive while aliens looked away, his hands began to shake, not with fear, but with the cold certainty of what must come next. Admiral Kevin Moore watched the recording 17 times before he trusted himself to speak, each viewing burning the image deeper into his memory until he could see Daniel Harris standing defiant even when he closed his eyes. And when he finally looked up at the officers gathered in the command center, they saw something in his expression that made them instinctively straighten their postures. How long until this reaches the public networks? Moore asked, his voice flat and controlled. It already has. "Sir," replied Communications Officer Patricia Webb. Her own eyes red from tears she had not bothered to hide. The quantum relay transmitted directly to civilian receivers. The whole world saw it live. Moore nodded slowly, understanding that there would be no controlling the narrative now. No way to soften the blow for the billions of people who had just watched their representative murdered while a room full of aliens did nothing. What are the initial reactions? "That is the strange part, Admiral," Patricia said, pulling up feeds from cities around the globe. There are no riots. The screen showed images from New York, Tokyo, London, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, and 100 other cities. And in each one, the streets were filled with people standing in absolute silence, many holding candles or small lights. All of them looking upward at the sky with expressions that spoke not of rage but of cold determination. "They are not screaming," Moore observed quietly. "They are waiting." "Waiting for what, sir?" "For us to tell them what to do." The door to the command center opened, and Captain Laura Bennett strode in wearing her dress uniform despite the late hour. A jaw set in a hard line that Moore recognized from their years of service together. "Admiral, I am requesting immediate transfer to whatever response fleet you are assembling," Laura said without preamble. "Daniel and I served together during the Vardish humanitarian mission. He was the best diplomat I ever knew, and he deserved better than to die surrounded by cowards. There is no response fleet yet." "Captain, then build one, sir, because if you do not, I will take my ship out there alone." Moore studied her face, seeing the grief she was barely containing beneath her professional exterior. And he made his decision. "You will command the task force. Captain Bennett, report to Orbital Station 7 at 0600 for briefing." Laura saluted sharply and departed, and Moore turned back to the screens, showing the silent vigil spreading across every continent, factories around the world. Something remarkable was happening without any government order or official request. As workers began voluntarily shifting production lines from civilian goods to military components, their movements coordinated through networks of veterans and engineers who had spent decades preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Retired soldiers reported to bases without being called, forming lines outside recruitment centers that had to open early to accommodate the crowds. And not one of them spoke of revenge or hatred. They spoke only of justice and of standing together. Christopher Blake, the head of Earth Defense Intelligence, arrived at the command center with a datapad containing his preliminary analysis, his young face showing the exhaustion of someone who had not slept since the transmission arrived. "Admiral, I have been studying the Calzari representative and his actions," Christopher reported. "This was not spontaneous. Varth planned every detail for months, possibly years. Show me." The main display shifted to show a web of connections, financial transfers, forged documents, and intercepted communications that painted a picture of deliberate conspiracy. The evidence he presented against humanity was fabricated by Calzari intelligence services, Christopher explained. The invocation of the ancient protocols was rehearsed. He knew exactly which laws to cite and how to phrase his accusations to trigger them. Why would they want this? Patricia asked, "What do the Calzari gain from murdering our ambassador?" "War," Christopher answered simply. "The Calzari Dominion has been declining for centuries. Their economy failing and their population growing restless. They need an external enemy to unite their people. And they chose us because they believe we are too primitive to fight back effectively." Admiral Moore laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "They have been studying us for 50 years, and they still understand nothing about humanity. Their intelligence assessments describe us as emotional, disorganized, and prone to self-destructive infighting," Christopher confirmed. "They expect us to fracture into competing factions, making us easy to defeat piecemeal. Instead, we go silent and start building ships." "Exactly. Admiral, they are already confused by our reaction. Moore walked to the window that overlooked the city of Geneva, where thousands of people stood holding lights in the ancient tradition of honoring the fallen. And he thought about what kind of response would truly honor Daniel's memory. Daniel spent his entire career trying to build bridges, Moore said quietly. He believed that humanity could earn the respect of the galaxy through patience and good works. We owe it to him to prove that his faith was not misplaced. Sir, we will not glass their worlds or slaughter their civilians, Moore declared. Turning to face his officers, we will demonstrate exactly what humanity is capable of when we choose to act. And then we will offer them something they do not deserve: mercy. He activated the communication system connecting him to the United Earth Assembly, where representatives from every nation waited for direction. Members of the Assembly, you have all witnessed what was done to Ambassador Harris. I am requesting authorization for a military response. Not for vengeance, but for justice. The vote was unanimous, recorded in less than 3 minutes, and when it was announced, the silent crowds around the world finally moved. Not to celebrate, but to begin the work that needed to be done. Factories increased their output. Shipyards accelerated their construction schedules, and scientists abandoned comfortable research positions to join weapons development programs that had been theoretical exercises until now. Laura Bennett stood on the command deck of the Resolute, her ship being refitted with systems that had never been tested in combat. And she looked at the photograph of Daniel she had placed near her station. "We are coming," she whispered, "and they will learn why the galaxy should have listened when you spoke of peace." Lieutenant Commander Melissa Grant approached with tactical reports, her expertise in fleet coordination already proving essential as the response force began to take shape. "Captain, we have 300 ships confirmed for the task force. How do you want to organize them?" "Into something the Kelazari have never seen before," Lava replied. "Something that will make them understand exactly how badly they miscalculated across Earth." The transformation continued through the night and into the following days. A civilization that had spent decades presenting itself as peaceful neighbors, revealing capabilities it had kept hidden. And somewhere in the depths of space, Ambassador Varath slept peacefully, unaware that humanity was not breaking apart as he had predicted, but coming together in ways that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. 300 human warships departed Earthspace on the 42nd day after Daniel Harris died, their engines burning bright against the darkness before they vanished into slipstream corridors that the galaxy did not know existed. And the silence that followed their disappearance was more terrifying to those watching than any declaration of war could have been. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the strange colors of slipstream space flow past the viewports like rivers of light. And she reviewed the tactical data that Christopher Blake had transmitted before their departure. "These corridors will cut our travel time by 3 weeks. Lieutenant Commander Melissa Grant reported from her station. "The Kelazari have no idea these routes exist." "Good," Lava replied. "The longer they remain ignorant, the greater our advantage." The fleet moved in perfect formation through the hidden pathways that human explorers had mapped decades ago and kept secret from the Galactic Council, understanding that some advantages were worth preserving for times of true necessity. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, High Chancellor Drin convened an emergency session to address the growing unease among member species. "The humans have not responded to our communications for 6 weeks, the Deshan delegate reported, her silver skin darker than usual with worry. "Their trade ships have returned to Earth, and their diplomatic staff have evacuated from every station in Council space. They are sulking like children," Vorath declared confidently. "This is exactly what I predicted. They lack the courage for real confrontation." "Then where is their fleet?" asked the Corvani representative. "Our long-range sensors show their orbital shipyards. Empty 300 vessels are unaccounted for," Voreth waved a clawed hand dismissively, probably hiding behind their moon. Trembling with fear, humans are prey animals at heart, despite their pretensions to predator status, but not everyone shared his confidence. And as the days passed, the reports grew more disturbing. A Kelzari supply convoy disappeared near the outer territories. 12 ships vanishing without sending a single distress signal. And when patrol vessels investigated, they found nothing but debris too scattered to identify, perhaps pirates, Voreth suggested, though his voice carried less certainty than before. A week later, a listening post on the edge of Kelzari space went silent, and the scout ship sent to investigate reported seeing a human vessel for exactly 3 seconds before their sensors were jammed, and the station was destroyed. They are testing our defenses, the Kelzari military commander warned Voreth in a private meeting. This is not the behavior of frightened prey. This is systematic reconnaissance. Then we shall reinforce our positions and wait for them to make a mistake. But the humans made no mistakes, and the attacks continued with surgical precision, each one revealing more about Kelzari weaknesses while giving nothing away about human intentions. Captain Bennett reviewed the intelligence reports in her ready room, marking targets and timing windows with the careful attention of someone who understood that every detail mattered. The Kelzari have concentrated their fleet around their home system, Melissa reported. They expect us to attack directly like every other species they have fought, which is exactly why we will not, Larva said. Christopher mapped their entire military infrastructure. We know where every ship is stationed, every supply depot, every communication relay. What is the plan, Captain? We surround them completely before they even know we are there. And then we give them one chance to surrender before we demonstrate what they have awakened. The fleet split into 12 task groups, each one taking a different route to their assigned position, moving through space like ghosts that left no trace for Kelzari sensors to detect on the Resolute. Lavra visited the crew quarters, where off-duty personnel gathered to share meals and conversation, and she listened to their talk of families back home, of friends who had known Daniel, of the future they were fighting to protect. Captain, do you think we will win? Asked a young ensign who could not have been more than 20 years old. Laura sat down across from her and considered the question seriously. Winning is not really the point, she said finally. Daniel did not die so that we could conquer the Kelzari. He died because he believed in something worth dying for. And our job is to make sure his belief was justified. What did he believe in? That humanity could be better than our worst impulses. That we could show the galaxy a different way of resolving conflicts. We are not going out there to destroy the Kelzari. We are going out there to teach them something they never learned. What is that? That mercy requires more strength than cruelty. And that true power comes from choosing not to use it when you easily could. The ensign nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. And Lara returned to the bridge feeling more certain than ever that Daniel would have approved of what they were about to do. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council descended into arguments as fear replaced complacency, with delegates demanding explanations that High Chancellor Drin could not provide. You assured us the humans were not a threat, the Veshan delegate accused Voreth. You said they would fragment and fight among themselves. They will, Voreth insisted, but his voice had lost its confidence. Any day now their alliance will collapse. Their alliance has existed for a century. It survived 2 civil wars, 3 economic collapses, and a pandemic that killed millions. What makes you think your actions would break it when nothing else has? Voreth had no answer, and as he returned to his quarters that night, he found himself checking the security systems with unusual frequency, jumping at shadows that had never bothered him before in the depths of space. The human fleet reached their final positions, forming a perfect sphere around Kelzari territory without triggering a single alarm. And Captain Bennett opened a communication channel to Admiral Moore back on Earth. We are in position. Admiral, all task groups report ready. Understood. Captain, you have authorization to proceed when ready. Laura closed the channel and looked at the star map showing the Kelzari home system, where millions of beings lived their lives unaware of the force that now surrounded them. Begin final approach, she ordered. Maintain communication silence until we reach the emergence point. I want them to see us all at once. The fleet began its final movement. 300 ships converging on a single system from 12 different directions, timing their arrival to the second. And somewhere in the distance, the Kelzari continued their preparations for a war they thought they understood. Christopher Blake had included a personal message with his intelligence package, and Lara read it one final time before the battle began. For Daniel, the message said, "Show them who we really are." Lara placed her hand on the viewport, feeling the cold of space through the reinforced glass, and she thought of the man who had stood in flames rather than kneel. "We will," she whispered. "We will show them everything." The Kelzari home system had known peace for 800 years, protected by a fleet that had crushed every enemy foolish enough to challenge their dominance. And on the morning of the 53rd day after Daniel Harris died, that peace ended in a single terrifying moment. Sensors across the system screamed warnings simultaneously as 300 human warships emerged from slipstream space at 12 different points. Their formations so precise that military analysts would later describe it as geometrically perfect. And for 30 seconds, the entire Kelzari defense network simply froze in disbelief. Captain Laura Bennett opened a broadcast on all frequencies, her voice carrying across military channels, civilian networks, and the emergency systems that every Kelzari had been taught to trust since childhood. "This is Captain Laura Bennett of the United Earth Navy, and I am addressing the Kelzari Dominion and the Galactic Council that enabled your crimes 53 days ago. Your representative burned our ambassador alive while your leaders watched and called it justice. Today, you will learn what human justice looks like." The Kelzari military commander scrambled to organize a response, ordering his ships into defensive formations while calling for reinforcements that were already too far away to matter. "All vessels engage the humans immediately," he commanded. "Destroy them before they can reach the inner planets." But the human fleet did not advance toward the planets. Instead, they held their positions at the edge of the system, forming a perfect blockade that cut off every escape route and supply line. "They are not attacking," the commander reported to Vorath, who had been summoned to the military command center in a panic. "They are just sitting there." "Then attack them." "You fool! We have looked at the tactical display." The screen showed Kelzari warships engaging human vessels at multiple points around the system, and the results were catastrophic for the defenders. Human ships moved with a coordination the Kelzari had never encountered, each vessel knowing exactly where its allies would be at any moment. Weapons fire converging on targets with devastating accuracy, while defensive systems anticipated and countered every. Kelzari Tactic Lieutenant Commander Melissa Grant coordinated the defensive operations from her station on the Resolute, her voice calm and precise as she directed task groups through maneuvers that turned the Kelzari fleet's numerical advantage into a weakness. Task Group 7. Rotate 30 degrees and concentrate fire on the lead cruiser. Task Group 3. Move to intercept the flanking force and drive them toward the gravity well. The battle unfolded like a choreographed dance. Human ships flowing around Kelzari formations and striking at weak points with surgical precision. And within 2 hours, the mighty Kelzari fleet had been reduced to scattered groups of damaged vessels, desperately trying to retreat. "Captain, the enemy flagship is requesting communication," the communications officer reported on screen. The Kelzari military commander appeared, his scaled face showing the exhaustion and fear of someone who had just watched everything he believed about the universe proven wrong. "We surrender," he said simply. "What are your terms?" Laura leaned forward in her command chair, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a civilization's grief. "We are not here to conquer you. We are here to demonstrate something your leaders forgot when they burned our ambassador. Humanity does not need to destroy you to defeat you, and unlike you, we choose not to. I do not understand. Your military capability has been neutralized. Your ships are disabled or destroyed. Your supply lines are cut, and your home world is defenseless. We could glass every city on your planet in less than an hour, and there is nothing you could do to stop us." The commander nodded slowly, bracing himself for the inevitable. "But we will not," Laura continued, "because that is not who we are. We want only one thing, and then we will withdraw. Name it. Ambassador Varath, surrender him to us for trial. And this ends today." At the Galactic Council, chaos reigned as delegates watched the battle unfold on their screens. Their carefully maintained assumptions about human capabilities crumbling with every passing minute. "They have destroyed the Kelzari fleet," the Theshan delegate reported in a voice that trembled with shock. 300 ships against 800. And they won in hours. High Chancellor Drin sat in stunned silence, remembering how she had dismissed human concerns about the ancient protocols, how she had allowed Vorath to murder their ambassador without consequence. And she understood now that her cowardice had brought disaster upon the entire council. "We must intervene," she said weakly. "Send ships to support the Kelzari." "No one will go," the Corvani representative replied. "We all saw what they did to a superior force. No species here wants to discover what humans would do to an even larger target." Admiral Moore appeared on the council's communication screens via quantum link, his face showing the controlled intensity of a man who had waited 53 days for this moment. "High Chancellor, members of the council, you had laws that allowed murder. You had the power to stop what was done to our ambassador, and you chose silence. Humanity no longer requires your approval or your membership in your organization. Admiral, surely we can negotiate." "There is nothing to negotiate. We are withdrawing from all council activities effective immediately, and we will establish our own relationships with species who share our values. But before we go, there is one matter of justice that must be addressed. What do you want?" "You know what we want. Surrender Vorath, or watch as we take him ourselves." The council erupted in arguments, some delegates insisting that surrendering Vorath would set a dangerous precedent, while others pointed out that humanity had already set a far more dangerous precedent by destroying the Kelzari military in a single afternoon. In the end, the choice was made for them when Kelzari authorities arrested Vorath themselves, dragging him from his quarters in restraints as he screamed about his rights and his status and his ancient bloodline. "You cannot do this to me," Vorath shrieked. "I am a member of the Galactic Council." "You are a member of the Galactic Council," the Kelzari security officer replied coldly. "Now you are a war criminal who cost us our entire fleet. Be grateful the humans want you alive." Laura Bennett watched as Vorath was transported to the Resolute, his arrival marked by complete silence from the crew who had seen the recording of Daniel's death more times than any of them wanted to remember. "What happens now, Captain?" Melissa asked. "Now we go home, and we show the galaxy something they have never seen before, an enemy who could have taken everything, choosing to take only justice." The human fleet began its withdrawal, leaving the Kelzari system in ruins but their planet untouched, their civilians unharmed, their ability to rebuild preserved for future generations on every world with access to galactic communications. Beings of every species watched in astonishment as the humans departed without claiming territory, without demanding tribute, without doing any of the things that victorious fleets had done throughout recorded history. Laura broadcast one final message as the fleet prepared to enter slipstream space, We could have burned your world as you burned our. Ambassador, remember that we chose not to. And remember that choice the next time someone tells you humans are primitive savages who deserve to be destroyed. We are more than you imagined. And now you know it. The star swallowed the human fleet, and the galaxy was left to contemplate what they had witnessed, knowing that everything they believed about power and civilization would never be the same again. Ambassador Varath stood in a holding cell aboard the Resolute as the ship traveled through slipstream space toward Earth, and Captain Laura Bennett entered alone, carrying a datapad that contained recordings she had watched so many times the images had burned themselves into her dreams. Have you come to gloat? Varath sneered, though his voice lacked the confidence it once carried. Or perhaps to torture me in revenge for your precious ambassador. Lavra said nothing as she activated the datapad and placed it where Varath could see the screen. And then she pressed play. The recording showed Daniel Harris presenting his petition to the council, his voice warm and hopeful as he spoke of partnership and peace. And Varath watched with growing discomfort as the scene progressed toward its terrible conclusion. I have already seen this, Varath muttered. I was there. Watch it again. The plasma engulfed Daniel, and Varath flinched despite himself. But Lara did not stop the recording. Instead, she let it continue to show what came after. The images from Earth that the galaxy had not seen Daniel's sister speaking at his memorial, a voice breaking as she described a brother who had devoted his life to building understanding between species. The children in his hometown releasing lanterns into the sky with messages of love for the man who used to read them stories about peaceful aliens who became friends with humanity. What is this? Varath demanded. This is what you tried to destroy, Lavra replied. Not just one man, but an entire way of seeing the universe. Daniel believed that every species could find common ground if they tried hard enough. And you burned him alive for that belief. He was naive. He was hopeful. And there's a difference. Hopeful people know the world is cruel, but they choose to work for something better anyway. That takes more courage than anything you have ever done. Varath looked away from the screen, but Lara continued. You expected us to become monsters when we came for you. You thought we would prove your accusations right by committing atrocities. That would justify everything you said about humanity, but we did not. And now you have to live with knowing that you were wrong about us in every way that matters. She retrieved the datapad and walked toward the door. We are not going to execute you, Varath. We are going to put you on trial, present evidence of your crimes, and let the galaxy watch as justice is served through law instead of violence. And then you will spend the rest of your life learning about the species you tried to destroy. Learning? Your sentence will include mandatory study of human history, art, philosophy, and culture. You will read our poetry and listen to our music and examine our greatest achievements. And every day you will be reminded of what you almost extinguished with your hatred. Lavra left Varath alone with his thoughts, and when the ship emerged from slipstream space above Earth, millions of people watched from the surface as their fleet returned home. The trial of Ambassador Varath began 3 weeks later in Geneva, in a courtroom designed to accommodate observers from across the galaxy, and the proceedings were broadcast on every network that could receive the signal. Christopher Blake presented the evidence he had gathered, financial records showing how Varath had funded the fabrication of evidence against humanity, communications proving he had planned the murder months in advance, testimony from his own staff who had grown disgusted by his Shemus. Varath offered no defense beyond claiming that he had acted within his rights under Kalzari tradition. And when the verdict of guilty was announced, he showed no emotion at all. You are sentenced to life imprisonment, the judge declared. Your confinement will include a program of education designed to provide you with the understanding you chose to reject when you Murdered Ambassador Harris, may you live long enough to comprehend the magnitude of what you did. The galaxy watched in astonishment as Vorath was led away, not to an execution chamber, but to a prison where he would spend his remaining years studying the civilization he had tried to condemn as primitive and dangerous. High Chancellor Drin resigned her position the following day, and the Galactic Council passed new laws abolishing the ancient protocols that had allowed Vorath's crime. But humanity did not return to the council chambers. Instead, they began something new. Captain Laura Bennett was promoted to admiral and given command of a new diplomatic fleet, not to threaten or intimidate, but to make contact with species the council had deemed unworthy of membership. The small civilizations, the young races, the outsiders who had never been given a chance. We are building an alliance based on mutual respect and genuine partnership, Lavra explained in her address to the United Earth Assembly. Not on fear or tradition or the assumption that some species are better than others. Daniel showed us what real diplomacy looks like, and we will honor his memory by doing what he would have done. The first species to join the new alliance was the Deshan, whose delegate had spoken against Vorath before the burning, and who had watched humanity's response with growing admiration. You could have destroyed us all, the Deshan ambassador said during the signing ceremony. The fact that you chose not to tell us everything we need to know about what kind of partners you will be. More species followed, drawn by the promise of something different from the Council's rigid hierarchies and self-serving politics. And within 5 years, the alliance had grown to include 30 civilizations, united not by treaties of convenience but by shared values and genuine friendship. Laura visited Daniel's memorial in Geneva on the 5th anniversary of his death, standing before the simple stone that bore his name and the words he had spoken at the end. Tell them I did not beg. Young Kelzari approached her hesitantly, one of the students who had been sent to Earth as part of a cultural exchange program that Vorath's own government had requested as a gesture of reconciliation. Admiral Bennett, may I speak with you? Lavra nodded, and the young Kelzari stood beside her at the memorial. I was taught that humans were dangerous animals who needed to be controlled, the student said. My entire education was built on fear of your species, but since coming to Earth, I have learned that everything I believed was wrong. What do you believe now? I believe that, Ambassador, Harris was right, that understanding is possible if we are willing to work for it, and I believe that my people made a terrible mistake that we must spend generations correcting. Lavra looked at the memorial one last time, and she smiled. That is exactly what Daniel would have wanted to hear. He never gave up on anyone, not even the species that killed him. The Kelzari student bowed respectfully and departed, and Lavra remained alone with her thoughts as the sun set over Geneva and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky somewhere out in the galaxy. Human ships were making first contact with civilizations that had never heard of Earth, carrying ambassadors who had studied Daniel's methods and embraced his philosophy, building bridges that would last for centuries. And in his prison cell, Vorath read human poetry for the first time, struggling to understand verses that spoke of love and sacrifice and hope in the face of despair. Never quite grasping why the words made him feel things he had spent his entire life denying, humanity had not just survived. They had transformed their grief into something beautiful, their anger into something productive, their pain into something that would help others avoid the same suffering. Daniel Harris had died standing, refusing to beg, and his people had honored him by becoming exactly what he always believed they could bet. He would never forget the day a human ambassador burned in the council chambers. But more importantly, they would never forget what happened next. How humanity proved that mercy was stronger than revenge, that justice was better than vengeance, and that the measure of a civilization was not how it treated its enemies, but how it chose to build its future The stars continued their ancient dance. But the beings who looked up at them had changed forever. And somewhere in the light of distant suns, Daniel Harris smiled.